right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, fellow Pandemonium travelers, this is Seattle Pandemonium Shutdown Day 91. I could restart the count because the Pandemonium has really only been going for like a week, but I'm rolling with it. This is Day 91 of the end of the world. At least that's how it seems. That's how it looks. Oh, boy. And, you know, just when you think the message has finally gotten through, like, to law enforcement, etc., you have that video, like, out of Buffalo yesterday, where apparently a 75-year-old man, and this is what it looks like, he had picked up dropped police equipment, like a helmet and some kind of radio or something, and was walking up to them trying to give it back to them. And the police, this is an old white man, by the way, and then the police shove him. He falls off, he trips over his feet and falls backwards and smashes his head on the pavement, and there's blood streaming out of his ears, and he is twitching. And then they just kind of like walk on, like they kind of walk on. I mean, they called for help, but the officer that shoved him goes to bend down and go, oh no, I hurt him. And then the other officer's like shoves him like, no, just keep going, because they were walking in a line. And you're just like, guys, that man might be dead. They said he's in stable condition and he's alive, but he's in serious condition. Old people are fragile, okay? Like, they have graham cracker bones. You can't do that kind of stuff to them. And why did you have to shove him anyway? He was trying to give you back something one of your officers dropped, from the look of it. Like, guys, what are you doing? Like, you understand that this is how we got here in the first place. Call your reps. Your sign should say, call this rep for this district where we apparently all live, with their office contact number on it. As big as you can make it. Just a little tip for you. I support, like, well, okay, so you know how everybody hates each other? Like, everybody's just super mad at each other. Everybody hates each other. Now, I've been filled with existential dread and kind of loathing of basically existence for some time now. I think if I felt sadder about it, it would be called depression. I don't necessarily feel sad about it. It's just, the world just continuously becomes worse. It's kind of my position, right? And then if I say that, it's like, oh, that's not true. And it's like, yeah, isn't it though? I mean, look around. Look at what is happening. Is this not all becoming worse than it was, like, say, a year ago, right? This is clearly worse than a year ago. I mean, am I blind? Am I taking crazy pills here? So the issue then is, what are we doing? Again, I've said it. I am deeply frightened, though, of what is coming after this. Because what do we do after this? Like, we're gonna apologize, and like the police are gonna apologize. You're gonna get the conviction of what's his name? Dowvin? See, I already forgot the guy's name. The officer with the knee on the neck thing. That guy. If we get a conviction, and then everyone just is fine, and we just kind of shrug and go back to business as usual. We do police reform. Like, what do we even do? And like the demands certain protesters are asking for, while on the one hand makes sense. Okay, you have a list of demands. Like, here in Seattle, they're saying, they're using bad language in my opinion, not swear words. I don't give a shit about that. I mean, poor slogan. It's defund the police, and I've seen this other places, and it's like, that's not going to sell with a lot of people, because a lot of people are, you know, they are still in the paradigm of being dependent upon law enforcement to provide protection for them and their businesses, whether or not they are very good at that anyway. But I have seen police do a good job, right? And defunding the police means something more than just take all their money away. Like in Seattle, it's something like a special operations budget for things like, well, ironically, rioting and protests and such. They have a big budget for all of that stuff because you gotta bring in lots of officers on the fly. You gotta have all this equipment and all this stuff, or all your officers get hurt, etc., etc. That's why they all look like NFL linebackers out there with all their gear on, RoboCop, right? But then they also have their own excuse me. They also have their own sort of discretionary. It's like a legal defense budget, right? Like, because law enforcement are always doing something that makes someone mad. Like, even if it's lawfully arresting you, you're gonna be mad. And if you have a lawyer, your lawyer is gonna make a case, whether there's one or not, just to drag things out and, make a plea bargain more spicy, right? And so they need to be able to defend themselves in court, but they were doing the job that the city told them to do. So then it becomes an issue of their legal fees being paid because they were doing their job, is the idea. Now you end up with basically a perverse incentive where the city sends the police out to do a job, and then they're basically immune from prosecution, essentially. I mean, I might be misreading that, but that's kind of my understanding. Now, again, this is not a small town policing problem. Although you do have small town policing problems. This is a big city policing problem because you have a smaller number of people, the police, trying to moderate the behavior of large numbers of people, and you have socioeconomic divisions in the actual physical space of the city. Like, some parts of the city are worse than other parts for things like crime. And then some of these things historically break down along like racial and ethnic lines. And at that point, you then have over-policing, to use a term, over-policing of minority communities. At which point, you get the problems that our policing creates, meaning maybe over-incarceration, maybe a heavy-handedness. You then have officers who are not necessarily from these minority communities developing a prejudice against the people they're policing because they're policing, quote unquote, these people all the time, and they are always doing this stuff. And so then all your interactions are negative because you've interacted with that community, with the worst element of that community. Now, at the same time, my understanding is you have you had the Hilltop shootout here in Tacoma back in the I did the podcast on it, late 80s. Basically a bunch of military guys got their guns together and had a shootout with gangbangers who were terrorizing the neighborhood. Now, the citizens of that neighborhood, the denizens, the neighborhoodins, what do you call them? What do you call it? A person who lives in a neighborhood? The hoodies? Anyways, the hoodies were like, we want more policing because look at what's going on. And then the police are like, well, we don't have the budget and we can't be there all the time and all this stuff. So you can have people calling for more policing of their community, and it can be justified, like, oh, look at all this violence and all this stuff that's going on. But it doesn't mean that they're supposed to come in and strangle people to death. That's not what they were supposed to be doing. Now, at that point, though, this is like it's round and round in a circle. Is because it's like, well, is the city responsible for enforcing the laws it passes? There's the question. There's the rub. So in Seattle, well, Washington, really. God, that's pleasant to listen to, I bet. In Washington, marijuana is legal. So now you don't have law enforcement. Well, is it legal? I forget. I'd have to go out and look up the actual stuff. It's it's legal in the right context. You can't do certain things with it. It can't be over a certain amount, etc., etc. It's not fully legalized. But the cops no longer, it's just de-emphasized, right? They just are focusing on other things. It's not really an issue. I suppose if you were committing another crime and they caught you with it, then it might be added to your, your offenses. But they're not actively targeting it, which then allows normal citizens who aren't doing anything wrong to go about their day with their legal marijuana, and there's no problems. Now that reduces the number of police encounters, and it reduces the severity of police encounters, because you now are no longer already a criminal when you start interacting with the police, right? And if you had priors or something, a possession charge can get you back in lockup. So why would you, be cooperative with law enforcement and see law enforcement as a good thing if they're sort of criminalizing you doing something that is relatively innocuous according to most sources? So, rambling. Anyways, the issue again, every time an officer shows up, it becomes an armed confrontation, at which point the severity and the potential for lethal action goes up, automatically goes up. Now you add more officers, you add an arrest, you add someone who's just not complying even a little bit. Now they have to escalate because you're escalating, and of course they don't want to get hurt, and then they sort of necessarily don't care if they hurt you. This is the other angle on it, I think, is, yeah, I have to hurt you because you don't want to get arrested. Like, that's it. It's like, I want to arrest you, we have to hurt you if you don't want to comply. And at that point, you have state-authorized violence against the citizenry for reasons that in some cases we demanded. Like, we demanded that they do something, that they enforce this law or that law, and now you have the cops strangling someone to death. Now, that doesn't mean that individual officers aren't liable for that, but it's just like, we will get more of this. Like, I don't know how to change this, right? This is like, you have to give cops much higher standards. You have to give them much more like hands-on, like basically martial arts training. Like I was jokingly saying Joe Rogan needs to take some of his $100 million Spotify money and open a whole bunch of like jujitsu dojos across the country, like just for cops, right? Just to train cops in proper, hand-to-hand techniques. Such that, oh, there's a crazy one. We got a wild one. You doing all right, dude? Oh boy. The corona crazies ain't over. But yeah, something like that. Like, it's a complicated mess. And again, if you have laws but you do not enforce them, do you really have laws? No, you do not. Functionally. Anyways, so I guess we're going to talk about police and police reform and all that stuff like forever now, until something changes. Something, whatever something means, until something changes. And even then, I still don't think people are going to be happy, because I think people just want to be mad at this point. And yes, I mean white people, not just black people. All right, that's enough for me from one day. I will talk to you later. Bye.